Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Authors on Mission podcast. Today, we're joined by Glen Guyton. He's the Executive Director at MCUSA and author of Navigating Microaggressions at Work. He brings a very unique perspective shaped by his journey from Air Force officer to religious leader. And today, we're going to talk about his insights from his groundbreaking work on workplace inclusion. So, whether you're a leader, an employee, or somebody interested in creative, positive change, this is the conversation that'll give you some valuable tools for building a better workplace. So without further ado, Glen, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me, Danielle. It's a privilege and an honor to be here with you today.
Right back at you. I was looking up a bunch of your stuff and, you've got a very inspiring story. I mean, I kind of just wanted to start off with Air Force officer. That's something that I actually have not heard on the show before.
Okay.
So I'm interested to see, how that experience shaped your perspective and your life, and how did you go from that to where you are now, working in sort of religious institutions and having been a published author? Where did that road start, and where has it taken you ever since? And tell all listeners too about it, because they're very interested to know more as well.
All right. Yeah. So you mentioned a part of my background, which was the executive director of Mennonite Church USA, which is a national religious organization, but I also have my own training company. You can check out my website, glenguyton.com. And that's where I primarily do my work with training corporations or educational institutions, helping them to foster a culture of innovation, reduce workplace stress, and elevate team performance. So I wear a couple of different hats and a really interesting journey, but I did start off as an Air Force officer. I went to the United States Air Force Academy. It was an opportunity for me to get a good education. My father had died when I was 14 years old. My parents were quite a bit older. My biological father was born in 1907. So he was 62 when I was born. And my mother, she was 41 when I was born. So my parents were quite a bit older. And so I needed to get an education, and the Air Force Academy was an option for me. I went to a pretty decent high school and did well in high school. So I had that opportunity. So it was a way for me to get a good education, to learn a lot, and to also then have a job when I left. But part of my work in the Air Force was process improvement. So continuous business improvement, efficiency, those types of things is what I did as an officer in the Air Force. I mean, it's nothing really, really exciting. Like, I didn't get to fly planes or anything.
Okay.
I have jumped out of planes. So I've jumped out of planes and gotten my jump wings, but I wasn't a pilot. I actually just did a lot of desk and paperwork.
So jumping out of airplanes is what they do. Like, when you didn't do your paperwork on time, they made you get up there and jump out of a plane? Or
No, I actually volunteered for that. Can you believe it? I volunteered to jump out of airplanes so I could get my jump wings. It was actually a good experience.
Mm-hmm.
It teaches you a lot about who you are and what your limits are. I think that's one of the things that I learned being an Air Force officer and also a cadet at the Air Force Academy.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds really exciting. And it's kind of great that you had a little bit of a balance between both ends of the job too. I've done skydiving twice myself, and
Okay.
I mean, I absolutely love it. People think that it's a terrifying thing, and there is that moment before you jump out that you kind of don't want to. But for me, I had somebody attached to my back. I didn't have a choice.
Okay.
But in that moment when you're sort of just falling to the ground, there's a lot of peacefulness.
It is. It's very
quiet,
peaceful,
right?
You don't feel like you're falling, right? It's more like sticking your hand out of the car window kind of a feeling.
Yeah, exactly. And it just, you go from tumbling to suddenly when the parachute's up and it's just quiet, it's peaceful. And,
That's right.
for me, I live in New Jersey, so I can see it's so funny. It was such a clear day that I saw the skyline of Philadelphia and New York at the same time. And it was just like so surreal, just looking back and forth. But
yeah, so you know the feeling, yeah.
Yeah. So, relating back to you, I can see how, that definitely was almost a transformative moment for you. to think back and think, you mentioned where limitations stand, right? Like when you overcome that sort of a fear, once you're actually there in the moment, I can see how that's a very powerful thing. Just looking around and realizing, okay, like this is where we are right now, and it's nice and it's peaceful.
Yeah, and I think I learned a lot of lessons like that at the Air Force Academy. I learned a lot about myself. You're thrust into this strange environment, and everyone at the academy is high performing in some area. Either they're great at athletics, or they're super smart, or they have a long history of parents and grandparents and uncles that have been in the Air Force. And then when you're just this black kid from Houston, Texas, you're kind of like, hey, why am I here? All those things that I thought I was the best at, I find out that everybody else is the best at it too. And
Mhm.
so, you're learning a lot about your identity. And I learned a lot about myself, about leadership, and really, how to treat people.
Mhm.
One of the things I know that your listeners might be interested in is, yeah, what is that transformative experience that got you to where you are? And one of my experiences was being what we call trained. They is where you have to recite knowledge and upperclassmen yell at you. But being trained to the point where I passed out because I was being a jerk to my roommate. And at that moment, I learned a lot about leadership, who my friends are, and who I was as a person.
Yeah, and I guess I can see how those experiences definitely sort of led you on the path to dealing with microaggressions and, appropriate workplace culture later on in life. Was there a specific instance? I mean, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about how were you punished for mistreating your roommate? I mean, was that sort of just like a, get off my side of the bed type thing, or
No, it was one of those things where I was a pretty high performing 4 degree, cadet. So, first year there, I actually went to the prep school, which is kind of the school that if you, like, I needed to get my SAT scores up to get into the Air Force Academy. So I went to the prep school first. And so I had 10 months of military training at a school that's connected to the academy before I went to the academy. And so I was already like an expert on all the military stuff because of that 10 months of experience. And I had become the outstanding basic in my squadron. And so, it was kind of people telling you, hey, you need to get your roommate together. He doesn't know how to march. He's a piece of crap. You need to whip him into shape. And so, I'm thinking like, yeah, I need to get this waist into shape. I need to show him how to do these things. And, it's people whispering in your ear about how bad my roommate was. And I let those things
Mhm.
go to my head. And I wrote a email like, "Oh, my roommate is horrible. He doesn't know what to do. He's a waste. He shouldn't be here." All those types of things. And then somehow this is the late 80s. So right. Email is a new thing. Somehow the email that I had sent got printed out on all of the squadron printers.
Oh, what?
Yeah, yeah. And so then people were reading this note. And so then I got trained. I had finished running cross country, I guess like a mile and a half. I had to go put my uniform on, and they stood me out in the hall and yelled at me for I don't know how long it was till I passed out. And then my roommate was the one that had to drag me back into the room to help me recover. And it was one of those lessons where I learned like you have to make decisions based on your values. And if you are that good or as great as I thought I was, I should be helping my roommate, not putting him down. And the other lesson was you can't listen to the crowd when it comes to how you behave, how you lead, how you treat people, because at the end of the day, you and you alone are going to be responsible for your words and your actions. And so you better be willing to stand by them. And that taught me a very valuable lesson of how to treat people.
Yeah, I mean, first off, it's kind of funny because it kind of sounds like something that would happen in like an episode of The Office or a sitcom where like, you accidentally spread, what you're thinking around to the entire office. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I can see how that kind of experience was, one, a little traumatizing for you,
Mhm.
like, oh no, like, but also the fact that, what you say, can come back to you, right?
Yeah,
And you had to learn how all those lessons that you just mentioned, but in addition to that, and I can definitely see how this shaped your image of workplace culture. And
yeah,
I'm sure that's only one of many different examples that you include in your book too.
yeah, yeah.
Now I guess I'm curious, coming out of the Air Force and all of that, Was this sort of experience what made you decide, you know what, I'm going to start an organization that helps with transforming workplace cultures, or what exactly led you down that path? And did the book come first or after?
Yeah, no, the book came after. I mean, I really value leadership. It's something that I've tried to pay attention to. How do people lead? I do believe that better leaders get better results. I've had to deal with my own position as a leader, right? That people will follow you. So what are you going to do with that weight, that burden? And just along the way, I've just learned that leaders make a difference, that leaders serve a very important and valuable role in our society. And it's a role that you have to take seriously. So I've had bad leaders. I've had great leaders to learn from. I've had good mentors. And so I've tried to pick out the best things from these people and learn from people that were, especially like in the military. So as a young second lieutenant, you graduate from the Air Force Academy, and immediately you're in charge of people that could have been in the Air Force for 20 years, right? A chief master sergeant, a senior master sergeant, someone who has years and years of experience, but they have to salute me because I spent 4 years at the Air Force Academy and I graduated with these butter bars on my shoulder. So these people, I'm leading these people, but for me to think that I know more than these people would be arrogant. And so I watched people, I admired like leaders in society like Dr. Martin Luther King, and I understood that I had a special call on my life as a leader, or for some reason people wanted to follow me. And so as I tried to figure out what I wanted to do as a professional speaker, as a workplace trainer, it needed to be something that had some meaning to it, because it's not just about, okay, let me just go and get speaking engagements and make money. I actually wanted to make a difference. So that's probably part of my religious background that comes into this, but I really want to make a difference. I believe that it matters how we treat people, how we lead. Leaders have such a profound impact on every aspect of our society. And, even looking at the election, I see how much of it an influence people can have. And I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat or whatever. People really pay attention to what these talking heads say. So I would hope that they talk with some sense of integrity and understand that their words actually mean something.
Yeah, yeah. So I can see now, like, that's why it's so important to you that within your book, within your trainings, that they recognize that and they don't just say, whatever, like half-heartedly, like everything that comes out of their mouths in every direction and every move they make, it has to be for something with a cause, and that,
Yeah.
Everyone's watching them. So I can see how that's a very important thing that you need to train them and teach them about in your trainings. Is that a big part of what you do? Is, that's sort of, is that a first step, or is that kind of an overarching theme throughout the entire training? What
Well,
would you
I
say?
think the theme is, what kind of culture do you want to create? I'm really big on workplace culture, because your workplace culture will drive all of these other things. The culture is what you build your systems around, and then your systems will reinforce the behaviors in the organization. So it all starts with, what kind of culture do you want to have? And one of the things I say about culture is the way we do things around here. Wherever here is, that's what the culture is. So you have team culture, you have the overall organizational culture, and so you have to address these things if you want to create a productive and harmonious workplace. Now you can lead in another way, but you're going to burn through people, just like I did when I was being a jerk with my roommate. It's going to have some short-term gains, but people aren't going to last. We need to take care of our people resources. So I believe in taking care of people, treating people right. And so we need to know how to do that effectively in the workplace. And of course, the ultimate goal in any workplace is, you want to make money, right? You want to make money, but to be successful and to have a sustainable organization, you have to take care of your key resource, which is people.
Yeah, of course. And, it's almost interesting because when you start, you have to think about that workplace culture, like you mentioned, right? So it's
Yeah.
almost like you're saying that there's multiple different types of cultures you can choose.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming there is many different on that same trajectory. Like a lot of them are more positive cultures, but ranging from one scale of strictness to another. And I'm sure you have a whole another side that's more negative in leadership, workplace culture. I guess I wonder, within your trainings and within your books, do you kind of offer different types of ideas for the culture? Or do you mainly advocate for, like, everybody should be created equally? Do you sort of get what I'm saying with that? Like,
Yeah. I mean, I definitely am for that. I'm all about building trust and transparent leadership. That's my style. I try to live out what I talk about. Now, I do tell people that you can have whatever goals and objectives that you want in your organization. If you want to be an organization that, hey, we only like men working for us, we only want 5'2" people from Kentucky working for us, you can do that. I don't think that's going to be very impactful, but whatever culture you create really should line up with your values. So what are your organizational values and what is the culture that's going to perpetuate that? So don't say we want a culture where everyone is welcome and everyone has equal say if you're not going to actually build the systems to do that. And that's normally the disconnect in organizations, is that there's a disconnect between what they say and their practices. And so you want those things to line up in your workplace culture. Now you can decide what your values are and what you want to stand on. I believe in a more inclusive type of environment. Now I do talk a little bit about your style, right? We all have different styles. I'm very direct. I like to use humor. I supervise a small number of people because that fits my personality. Some people may be a little bit more like to communicate. They want a more group process as far as make decision making. I don't tend to do that. I do take input and I have feedback loops. How you do that may look different based on your leadership style. So that's where I make the nuances and say, hey, you have to find a way to do these things in a way that fits who you are as a leader.
yeah, I like that. And I guess that, you probably offer sorts of, ways to find out who you are as a leader, because a lot of people might be like, I don't know who I am as a leader, right? A lot of
Yeah,
it probably takes going into the field and testing it out yourself, or,
yeah.
a lot of deep introspection as well, I would say. So I'm sure that's something that you also have to train as well and touch upon.
Yeah, you have to fit, one of the assessments I did a while back was the intercultural development inventory that kind of helps you understand how well you do with differences. Some people don't do well with differences. They're used to what I would call like a pedigree bias, right? We think that if you go to Harvard, hey, I went to Harvard, that automatically elevates people, right? In our minds. Oh, they went to Harvard, they went to Yale. But it could be someone that's twice as smart that went to University of Texas, hook 'em horn. Went to University of Texas, right? Just because you went to Harvard doesn't mean that you are the best, but we have a bias toward certain looks, toward certain schools, certain backgrounds. And so those are the things that I really want to work with leaders to help them see past, hey, what's my bias? What am I blind to? Where do I need help to have a broader perspective that will help me accomplish my goals? And so that's part of the work that I do, is helping people understand who they are, helping them understand their blind spots. Like I had blind spots when I was a young leader. So what are my blind spots and what do I need to do to overcome those blind spots or bring in the right people to help me as I lead?
Yeah, and what, I guess this goes directly into microaggressions, which is a huge part of your book,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
Like, you don't even realize that you might be like, having these thoughts, but indirectly it's, right everywhere that you look. You talk about microaggressions a lot, and when I was flipping through your book, you also talked a lot about imposter syndrome. So I
Hmm.
guess I wonder, within your book and within your trainings, how do these two things interrelate? And, what sort of advice do you offer to your clients and to everybody who, reaches out to you regarding these things? I mean, how do you recognize them? How do you get over them?
Yeah. I don't know if we always get over these things as much as we have to recognize them, right? They're
Right.
always a part of us in some sense. When we get stressed out, when we're tired, we've had a number of things happening at work, we can always revert back to that unhealthy version of ourselves. We go back to our base self per se. So I try to get people to recognize those things. That's why you have to put systems in place to keep the culture that you want moving forward, right? Because we will fail if we don't have strategies in place, processes in place to perpetuate that culture that we want. So, a lot of times with microaggressions, they can happen for a number of reasons. Part of it could be the culture that people have created at the workplace. If you create a toxic workplace culture, then people will say things that are inappropriate because that's what they are used to. If you don't educate people, they will say things because they may have a limited scope of experience. So they may not know the things that they're saying are inappropriate because they don't have the context, especially as the workplace changes or becomes more diverse. So they need to be educated. So you have to work on your culture, putting the right systems in place. You have to educate people. And then also, people have to have a sense of self-awareness. Why am I saying this? Is it something I'm saying because I don't feel adequate and I need to tear someone else down? Is this how I was mentored? So I think this is good leadership. So I'm going to continue that same culture that's toxic because I don't know any better. There can be a number of reasons. So part of it is just helping people to look and see those different things that are going on. And sometimes you just have to hear it, right? You just don't know. Like, okay, I'm being a jerk. I didn't realize people thought I was being a jerk. And so when you have transparent leadership, open communication, I think it helps us to start uncovering some of the pitfalls and problems that may be happening in the workplace. Or sometimes it's just change, right? We've gone from a workplace that looked like this, a certain demographic, now we're shifting. So now our behavior has to change.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm noticing a big part of this might be just, willing yourself to take a moment and pause and think and look around and say, like, to find that recognition within yourself. Because I think sometimes if we're moving along with our day and we're just focusing on getting the work done without thinking about the culture and the impact that you're having on your employees or the people around you, that might be another part of where this all comes from too. Perhaps that's another piece of advice you might mention too, is that you need to stop and find time to recognize it. And I mean, for example, if I was going about my day as a leader, I might not initially, find myself stopping to recognize it. So I guess my question is that another one of your tips?
Yeah, well, you have to evaluate your workplace, your systems. You have to check in with your employees. That feedback is very important. We have to have feedback and create systems of feedback. Otherwise, we may think things are going well, but they actually aren't. So how do we evaluate our performance as a leader? How do we know that we're taking care of our people?
And that's exactly where it comes from, that transparent leadership, right?
Yeah.
Allowing employees to, have a say and feel like they're able to give that type of feedback too.
Yeah. And some leaders aren't willing to look at themselves. And part of it is, you talked a little bit about imposter syndrome. Sometimes we feel like we have to be somebody else when we don't. I mean, and I will say, I've experienced this with a number of women early in corporate America. They led like men, right? They led like men because that's who leaders were, right? They were all 6 feet and above white guys. And so if you were going to be successful in a corporation, that's the model. And so you would feel inferior if you did not follow that same model as a woman or as a shorter guy or as a black guy or whatever. And so you felt like imposter. So you have to understand, okay, there are different types of leadership, different styles of leadership. My style is fine. I don't have to be that person. And that's nothing negative about how those people led in general. I mean, there were some toxic things about all kinds of leadership, but hey, you don't have to lead like that because that isn't you. You have different experiences. Glenn is Glenn, Danielle is Danielle. You'll never be Glenn. I'll never be you, right? I'll never be you because I didn't grow up in, what you say, New Jersey? I didn't grow up in New Jersey. I grew up in Texas. It's a whole different culture. It's a whole different way of living in Texas versus living on the East Coast. And I've lived on both of them, and it's totally different. Texas is like a whole different country.
Yeah, I've been to Texas once before, actually, and I can see that, like wherever you are. So even if it's in the same, even from the United States, it's different climate, different culture,
Yeah, right.
different things you could do even,
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see that. And that's another just like whole aspect of it. You have to look at each of your employees as a separate person and knowing, their strengths, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, and, finding a way to cater to each of them and helping them. At the end of the day, we want success for the company, right? So, finding those things within each employee that can make them at their peak performance and also feel welcome within the industry too.
Yep.
So I can see where you're going with that.
Yeah, and I have another book that I wrote called The Art of Harmonious Trust. So that's this book, The Art of
Hold it up. So let's see. I see a bright yellow cover.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, The Art of Harmonious Trust. And so how do we build trust? And this is built on the work of a business educator that talks about the formula for trust. I mean, so you imagine, like, sometimes I use my guitar when I'm speaking. I'm not going to play it today, but you have this like a guitar, right? You have all these notes, on this guitar, and you could just play one string. You could just play one string, and it wouldn't be great, right? It would make a noise, but it wouldn't be great. So how do you get all those different strings and notes working together? So that's kind of like trust in the workplace. And so the formula for trust is reliability, consistency, credibility, and benevolence. Those things are what make up trust. And so as we think about these things in the workplace, what do we need? We need our leaders to have consistent behavior, right? It needs to be predictable of how we behave and how we act. Now, that's going to be different for some of us, right? Some of us are going to be always kind of high. Some of us may be a little bit lower. But if we're up and down, people don't know what to expect from us as leaders. We need to be reliable. People need to know they can depend on us as leaders, that we're going to deliver, we're going to do what we say we're going to do. Those things are important. We need to have some sense of credibility. Like, you have to have knowledge. You can't just be nice and reliable, but not know how to do your job. So credibility and knowledge is important. And then the last part of it is, which I think is very important, is this sense of benevolence, which means that people need to feel like you genuinely have the best interests at heart, that you care for them in some way. I mean, you don't have to care for them like you're their parent or like you're their brother or sister or anything like that. But they need to know that when they come to work, they aren't just a widget, because people are never going to perform if they think they're just a disposable asset. So people need to feel like, hey, there's either something bigger in my work, or my supervisor, whoever's leading this, cares about me in a broader way.
One thing I'm noticing, Glenn, is the way that you explain all these topics, which, again, are very important for everyone to know. And our listeners today are, we're a huge group of people who are entrepreneurs, they're business people, they want to get their books out, their ideas on a page, right? So you're speaking directly to them as you're telling them all these tips right now, because that relates directly to what they've been doing all day long in their offices or, their virtual workplaces, wherever it is they're working. But, one thing I'm noticing is the way that you're presenting your information to me right now. And I think we're going to use this opportunity to kind of segue into the actual writing of your books, because, you held up your book before and then you brought out your guitar. And, both of those things were just two ways to sort of add a visual element to what you were explaining, or, in this case, an auditory element, right? So
Right.
this, I'm noticing, is something that you must have within your writing style as well. It seems to me that you have a certain talent for taking a complex topic and finding a metaphor or something relatable to your audience, like you just did to me. Is that something that you incorporate in your book and something you would recommend, any other aspiring authors to do as well?
Yeah, I think you have to figure out your style. Okay, so I'll go to what I tell people. Some people are very analytical, theoretical. That's not Glenn. That's not me at all. I am a practitioner. I don't want you to leave my workshop or my training with a whole bunch of theory. I want you to leave with your hands dirty, right? That you've worked through these things. So I have practical scenarios. I want you to be able to leave my workshop or read one of my books and say, okay, I can do these one or two things to help me achieve my goals. These things are concrete, actionable items. That's my style, and that's my style of writing. Now, some people are very and I read both. I read theoretical stuff, these grandiose principles when I need to think broadly to help expand my horizon. So there's a market for that. But then there's also a market for, hey, I just need to know how to fix this thing. I need to know how this works. And so part of what I do in my workshops is they're interactive. I have in my microaggression book, I have scenarios that you can work through with your team. You go through questions and you can practice these things. It's kind of like I went to Puerto Rico with my son. We went scuba diving. So I know a little bit of Spanish, right? I'm from Texas. I know a little bit of Spanish. But I learned so much when I go to places like Puerto Rico, because I'm forced to use this Spanish that I've read the books and I've done Duolingo and all these things. But now I'm at Burger King at 2 a.m. and trying to order a veggie Whopper, a vegetarian Whopper. And I'm saying, sin carne, yo quiero vegetales, so I'm just like, I got to learn these. I said, okay, what's the word for vegetables, is it vegetal or is it verduras? So then I'm looking up verduras versus vegetales, and I'm learning, right? So now I know the difference between when you use verduras and when you use vegetal. So I had to learn that because I had to practice it. So that's kind of how I want people to leave my trainings. And when you can put this book in your desk and say, okay, I need to talk about this in the workplace. Here's an exercise. Here's some questions I can go over with my team. And this book should be highlighted and dog-eared and all those other things. That's the type of writing that I like to do.
Yeah, yeah, I can see how, every person has their own style.
Yeah.
I certainly, prefer and to read books that are in your style as well. Like I actually just wrote a blog post about this. If you make your content too technical, too full of jargon, too just information wise, people are going to close your book. They're not going to want to continue on. They're going to probably just feel jaded over. But when you're explaining it with context and
Yeah.
metaphors and making it interactive, that, in a way that makes it dog-eared, I feel like it definitely relates more to the reader. Not to discredit anybody who, does like to add in all that technical aspects,
Yeah.
but I think it's important to reach your audience. Maybe your audience is, a very niche group of scientists that
Yeah.
would benefit from that. But for the most part, if you want to get your book out to a wide audience, it's important to make it accessible to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you just have to know what your goal is, right? What's your intent when you're doing these things? I've made a conscious decision to be a practitioner, and some of the other artists, not artists, but authors that I admire, like Seth Godin. I love his stuff. I mean, it's just really easy to look at and to dissect. So that's the kind of style that I guess it's aspire to when I'm writing. I want my books to be used and to actually make a difference. The greatest thing that you can hear is when people hire you again. So okay, the learning must have stuck, like something hit a chord with people. And so that's some of the feedback that I get. Hey, this is very practical, is easy for us to understand. And in some sense, I've worked with some technical groups where you kind of have to lay out like they need kind of like a roadmap, right? They need like a formula for them to understand these people's lives.
Yeah, no, and I mean, who wants their book to just sit on a shelf, forgotten about, right? You want it to be something that people pull open, carry with them, use as a reference. So, not only relatable, but, easy to access too. I'm sure you find ways within your book to make if your reader's thinking of a certain tip they're trying to get back to, it's easy for them to just open it right up and they know exactly where to find it too. It's not just hidden within the rest of the context. So just another tip right there for our listeners hoping to write their own books is that you want to make it easy to access, relatable. That's how you're going to get the audience to stick with you and to relate to your content. It's a great method, Glenn.
Yeah, I don't know what your listeners, what their primary focus on, but if like me, you do training and speaking, and then I can pick up any book and have a program related to it, right? And I can expand it, I can train, I can go deeper. As a matter of fact, one of my most recent trainings, I used this microaggressions book, and we went through scenarios. I went through scenarios with them, and I just had a feedback session with the group, and they said, hey, we really appreciated the scenarios, the opportunity to practice these things. And interestingly enough, one of the HR people kind of said something in the meeting that kind of threw everybody off, and folks were like, man, I can't believe this person said this. They came back and apologized, but my scenario really helped one of their senior leaders think through some of the processes. Otherwise, they would have been unaware that this was an issue for some of their employees. But because of the training and the practical scenarios, it helped them move forward in a different direction.
Yeah, I mean, that's all you can do is make it practical, make it relatable, something they could do in the moment. So now I'm wondering, do you get a lot of feedback where people come to you saying like, I used your book in this certain scenario. Like I was glad I had it with me. I opened right up to it. I remember the specific exercise that you taught me in your trainings. I'm sure you get a lot of that kind of feedback. Is that correct?
Yeah, I get people saying basically that the training was memorable. Like, hey, this was very practical. I was able to use X or Y, and I try to capture the feedback from people. The abstract concepts. So these tools and putting it down in writing and kind of giving people scenarios to think through even helps those more analytical minds understand what's going on. These abstract concepts are sometimes too fuzzy for them to wrap their hands around, but if they have a scenario to match it, they can understand it.
Yeah, I always say that, at Authors on Mission, we do a lot of different things, so we are angel writers, we're editors, we're marketers, we're social media managers, but, one of these hats that I do take on is the angel writing, and I always say to my clients, you need to have those stories, especially, in the
Yeah.
beginning of a chapter when choosing a new
Mhm.
concept. It's, it helps them see themselves in that scenario. It relates, it's their pain points. And it's a natural way to feed right into the content of your text. And then you could always draw back onto that same example. And that's just an amazing tip I always like to give my clients and any author, aspiring to write a book that has a lot of complex content in there. It
Yeah.
helps to validate it. So,
Yep. Because you know it, right? You know it, but how do you explain that to someone else that doesn't have your depth of knowledge or doesn't have their experience? Like it's crystal clear to you,
exactly.
but that's your bias, right? Your bias. You already have information. You already have kind of something mapped out in your mind, but you have to understand your reader doesn't have that. That's why I love editors. Aren't editors the best? They give us that extra perspective.
So you said you're editor?
Editors, yeah,
Oh,
editors. Like, yeah, I've worked with a number of editors. They help you write better.
yeah. I was going to ask you about that. What is the writing process like for you? I wasn't sure if you were writing, independently. You have a team of editors behind you, you said. But tell me a little bit of the process. What did you go through? It'll
Yeah,
help
so
our listeners understand too.
I have, again, I wear a number of hats. So I've had a books that I've done on my own, where I've hired editing companies. So I've hired a number of editors, and again, I've written several books, right? So I've had a kind of a teacher, English teacher, read my writing and who's helped me with my examples. Say, I don't understand this. What are you trying to say? So you do your rewrite. I've allowed myself just to write and say, hey, Glenn, you're not an editor. You are a writer. So that's my tip is if you're a writer, write. Let editors edit. You can't do both effectively. It'll take you 20 years to write a book if you're editing and writing it. So
Oh,
that's one thing I learned early on. So I always, whatever I do, I always hire an editor to read my writing. I've
yeah,
done
that's
a
an incredible tip because I mean, you're going to spend forever if you're rereading every one of the sentences that
yes,
you're putting onto the page. I
right,
highly recommend that as well. You need a team of people and a different
yeah,
perspective to look over
yeah.
it.
Yep. And so I've actually had a publisher to book when I for my Mennonite Church USA role. I had a professional publisher, and so that was it was a lovely experience, right? Because they hired the editor, they hired all the graphics people, and I just had to write and just do my rewrite. So that was much easier. If you can get a professional company publisher to publish one of your books, is so much easier sometimes than writing it on your own. I mean, I've published these other books and hired my own editors. I've hired my own artists, and so you gotta, I don't know. It's work both ways. It's just depending on what type of work that you want to do. But I always have a separate editor and a proofreader to go through my stuff because there's no way that you're going to catch all of the things, uh, all the mistakes that you make. And even after you hire a proofreader, you still have to go back through it and probably do it a couple of times to make sure you catch everything.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a very complicated task. And, you know, you can't guarantee that it's going to be done quickly, that it's going to be done correctly,
Yeah.
that the readers are going to understand everything you say, and that they relate to it if you don't have at least another pair of eyes looking at it, be
Yeah.
it a beta reader or an editor or proofreader, whoever it is. The good thing about Authors on Mission is we kind of do all those services. So whatever it is
Okay.
you actually are looking for, or we kind of package our content or package our services based on what you're looking for. Maybe you already have the book written, you just need someone to sweep through it for grammar and spelling, or maybe you have just like a jumble of ideas in an outline and you need someone to actually help you put it together and fill in the gaps. I mean, that'd be more angel writing, which is what we call ghostwriting here.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, and that's definitely a tip that a lot of our listeners need is you can't do it on your own.
Nope.
Our listeners might have started their businesses on their own, or maybe they think they can do anything just by giving it a try. You certainly can, but is it worth the amount of time, stress, energy, where you work
Yeah.
with a team, make it easy, and make it right? So,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I encourage that and hope people take you up on that. Once you find a good editor, I feel like I'm a good writer, right? But editors just take you to that next level. I mean, again,
Next
because
level, yeah.
you're so close to this project, you just can't see everything because you've looked at those words for so long and so many times. And at some point, like I'm sick of reading my own book, right? I'm sick of reading. I done read
Right.
this book 100 times.
The
I'm
words
sick of
start to
reading it.
blur together a little
Yeah, yeah.
bit.
So it's good to have another set of eyes. And again, I also, there's a difference between a proofreader and a content editor too. So
Yeah, no, there's all different types, and we could define each one, but I guess I'm also curious. I mean, so do you go through multiple different rounds with your editors? You kind of just
yeah,
pick one person and yeah,
yeah. No, I go
that's kind
through.
of what I do too. You got to go through it and they'll provide feedback. We work back and forth a little bit, provide comments until you're perfectly happy, until it's exactly what you're expecting. So,
Yeah, normally I go ahead and I write it, and so I write the book and write what I think it's going to be, and then I'll put it through some type of proofreading program, for my first try,
Grammarly or
yeah,
something like
Grammarly or
that, right?
something, and to try to clean it up. Then I'll get the editor to read it and go through it for content, right? And so then I go, then you're doing a rewrite again for content. You're changing things and normally sending it back for another round to look at the content to make sure you've caught all those things. I normally do it like 3 times, right? Kind of 3 times is kind of good for me, and then make sure it's proofed before you do that final copy. But that's kind of been my process. I usually do about 3 rounds, especially if I'm the one just paying for it myself.
Understood. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt to just keep going over it until you find there's always going to be something else that you
Yeah,
might
yeah,
find that you can use, you can improve on, even if it's a missing period here or if you need to restructure an entire page. I mean, you always need to make sure that it's exactly where it is before you publish it, because once it's out there, I mean, you can make a new edition of it, but its initial impact does play a huge role.
yep.
So I get that.
Then make sure you get the what's the printed copy to make sure it's laid out right. That because then it can look like, oh, okay, this was good. Look, I hate the way this is laid out. We need to lay it out differently. I've done that too. Just say, nah, this needs to be reformatted. I don't like the font. I've done that too.
Yeah, formatting is a huge thing too. I mean, that's another service we offer as well. You don't want one chapter to bleed on to only like another line of a whole another page, right? You need to make
Yeah,
sure it's all properly aligned, things look good. Because I mean, as a reader, the visual aspect does play a big part. If
yep,
it's properly aligned, it adds to the understanding of your text too.
yep.
So, Glenn, now I'm wondering, you've written at least 2 books now. Is it 2? Or do we have more than that?
I have 4 books.
4 books.
Yes.
Okay. You did a little look around there. Do you have them all with you right now?
Actually,
Sorry,
I
I just
do.
noticed
I do
that.
actually have. I mean, it's in the closet, so I had to get up. But I have like
Okay.
4. The first
Well,
one is bad. It was like the first one I wrote and self-published is bad. But I mean, it's just I would do a lot differently. But then I have one again that was professionally published, and then the other 2 self-published. So
okay. Why do you say the first one was bad? I mean, a lot of our
well,
listeners
okay.
here have that same fear that their book's gonna come out, quote unquote, bad. But why would you
Yeah,
say that?
I shouldn't say that because it was a good book. I thought it was a good concept, but it was my first one. I just think about everything I would have done differently. I learned so much with my first book. But if you are an author, hey, go put it out there because somebody, if only 1 or 2 people are inspired or changed by your book, that's good. That's good. So yeah, I
Yeah, yeah.
shouldn't say bad. I just would have done a lot different. I learned a lot. It was my learning project.
Understood. Yeah. And I mean, what I said before is, sure, it's already printed, it's already on the shelves, but, it doesn't ever hurt if you ever wanted to go back and make
Yeah.
like an updated version,
Yeah.
like the 2025 edition or something like that, maybe explains some concepts a little better, adds some more practical exercises like you love to do, like that sort of thing. I mean,
Yep.
there's nothing stopping you. You could always
Yeah.
kind of
I
swirl
can.
back around.
Yep. Yep.
A
They're
lot of
all on
people do that.
Amazon though. All my books on Amazon. So
Okay, great. Yeah. I mean, like, if you're ever interested in looking back at it and, giving it a little retouch, I'm more than happy to kind of help you out with
okay.
it because I kind of see where you're going with your different approaches. You
All
want to
right.
make sure that it's relatable and engaging. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if you ever feel like that's another project on your list, let me know. Something to think about.
All right. All right. Sounds good.
On that same type of, pathway there, what do you have on your radar right now? Our listeners who are curious, they know that you offer workplace trainings and you have all these
Yeah.
books out. What's next for you, Glenn? Anything that you can share with us that our listeners might be able to, learn a little bit more about you?
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully you can connect with me on LinkedIn or YouTube. Everything is Glen Guyton. I make it really easy. So just my first
You
and
do have a
last
very
name.
easy name.
Yep, yep. So my big plans now, I have a webinar coming up in February, the future of work. Again, this all relates to culture. I've done some work in strategic foresight. I really like to position myself as a cultural futurist to think about the human aspect of work. So the changes that are coming, 2030, there's a big shift in our population demographics. How will that impact the workplace, and what strategies do we need as leaders to be prepared for what's coming? A lot of baby boomers are going to be retiring. We have a much older workforce. We're going to have less young people coming into the workplace, more immigrants. And so how do you prepare for those things? So I have a really exciting webinar coming up. I'll post about it on LinkedIn and YouTube. So if you follow me there, you can learn about that webinar.
Great. So anybody can sign up for it
Anybody
if
can
they're
sign up
interested?
for it. Yep, anybody can sign up for it.
Great. Okay. You know what? Send me the links for it so we can put it right with this podcast. So everybody listening today,
Okay.
go ahead and click right on it. You even pause our conversation right now and go ahead and check it out so that, you don't want to miss this thing because times are changing every year. So you need to be prepared for those types of changes in the workplace. You need to adapt your business to make sure that you're accommodating for these changes. So it's a very important thing.
Yep.
And I'm guessing does it directly mirror your book then?
No, it doesn't directly mirror the book. Again, as things change, there are different interests in how we talk about things in the workplace. There was a time when we talked about affirmative action, we talked about anti-racism, we had diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-bias training. So the principles that we use as far as how we develop workplace culture are very similar to some of these other things, but how we talk about them in the workplace changes. Language evolves, right? And how our strategies evolve of how we want to implement these things in the workplace. And so I try to be aware of those things, especially as a futurist, right? As we think about strategic foresight, what is the best way to help people understand how to build better teams, to create a culture of innovation, to focus on teamwork and employee wellness? How do we do that?
Yeah, yeah. So again, very important for everybody, especially business leaders that are listening today. It's a huge audience that we have right here for
All
everybody
right.
in
Hey,
the same.
audience.
So check it out because this is important stuff. You can't just take a back row seat in your, journey as a leader
Right.
without, you need to get into the front driver's seat and figure out what's the next turn you have to take, what's next on the road. This is an
Right.
important thing. So I'm glad you're doing that, Glenn. It's going to be very, very impactful for everyone who signs up. And, again, check out his YouTube videos, everybody, his LinkedIn, because you're going to keep sharing even more insights that are going to be
Yeah.
very beneficial.
It's all free. Hey, there's one question I was hoping I was going to get asked, but I didn't
Oh,
get
please
asked.
go ahead.
Was it Star Trek or Star Wars? I heard
Yeah.
Andy Hunt. I was like, hey, that's a good question. We could talk about Star Trek in the future, that kind of utopian society. Like the work that I do, hopefully, will be kind of like what would influence a future like that, right? Where there's no war, where we're all getting along, and we have folks from all these different planets coming together, working together for good, right?
Love it. Love it. I'm glad that you brought that back. Um, well, hey, I mean, aside from that, any other particular messages you want to leave us with today before we start signing off?
No, just leadership is important. And so if you
Leadership
are a
is
leader,
important.
what you do really has an impact. The decisions that we make today will have a ripple effect throughout our organization. And so we have to think about the culture that we're creating today because it will impact how we perform in the future.
Understood. Understood. Well, you guys, you heard it from Glenn Guyton himself right there. Take it to heart. Look at his resources. It's incredibly important in today's climate. So, I mean, thank you so much for joining us today. It really does mean a lot that you're able to come to our show and talk about your books and the writing process, because these tips are going to be things that our listeners hold on to for years to come. We never know the impact we make. And, by having it in your book, coming onto the podcast, sharing it at your webinars, you don't know the ripple effect that you have. And the same goes to our listeners too. You got to get your ideas out there because you never know what's going to happen. So
That's right. Get them
having
out there.
benefits. Well, to To all of our listeners, thank you also for joining us on this insightful conversation with Glen Guyton. His books are available now, and you can learn more about his work at his websites, his webinars. And remember, you know what, creating an inclusive workplace, it's not just about grand gestures, it's about the small daily activities that make everyone feel valued and respected, and staying up to date on all of that too is incredibly important. So until next time, everybody, keep working towards positive change in your own workplace. If you have an idea for your own book as well, don't hesitate to get it out there on the pages. You saw how it helped Glenn. And here at Authors on Mission, we're here to help you bring that book into reality as well. So without further ado, Glenn, thank you again for joining us. And to all of our listeners, have an amazing evening, and check us out next time when we're talking to another amazing author. Have an amazing evening. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.
All right. This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.